two-state solution as well. Fine. Fine. If you reject the two-state solution, fine, because that's what you're going to get, a rejection of the two-state solution. The only way the occupation is going to end, the way the occupation of Germany ended, the way the occupation of Japan ended, is with peace. The only way you're going to get peace is a two-state solution. If you think that Israel is going to commit politicide, is going to give up its right to be a Jewish nation, you're living in an unreal world. Yes, that's extremism. Yes, that's zealousy. What we're hearing here is a supporter of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Nothing is left to us.
She can speak in a calm voice and write nice novels, but she is an extremist, and she is a barrier to peace. You have to understand.
I would love to hear from the first question. Because this is an opportunity for us to really hear from and understand radically different points of view, expressed literarily and otherwise. Now I'm interested in what you'd like to ask. The only thing is I'm going to be a lot stricter about this being a question.
My question has two parts, and I'll be very brief. The first part is you're too young to remember the previously mentioned Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Jenin Husseini. He was the major political and religious leader of Arabs. There was one person who was willing to talk to... I'm coming to the question. Stop interrupting me. Stop interrupting me. That's a sabotage. The question is that, are you aware that the one person who was willing to talk to a group of Jews who wanted your solution, Martin Buber, Yehuda Leib Magnus, head of Hebrew University, and others, was murdered. He was from the tribe of Husseini, you mentioned. He was murdered for talking to Jews. And then same Husseini, while he was in the environment of...
What is your question?
I'm coming to it. When he was in the environment of Hitler, got his promise that when Palestine would be conquered, Jews will be murdered. That attitude never changed. And the second part of the question is that here, the right...
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question.
The question is, are you aware of the intention to destroy the Jews, which never stopped, and Hamas has it in its covenant?
Okay,
would you respond?
A question, and
am I aware of someone's intention? But you did mention Martin Buber, so I actually have a quote by him. Martin Buber said, "We will have to face the reality that Israel is neither innocent nor redemptive, and in its creation, the expansion, we as Jews have caused what we historically have suffered, a refugee population in diaspora." I don't know what your point is to talk about Jenin Husseini, whether, it's to say that you deserve to be expelled, or what the purpose of that is. I think that is, in various forms and throughout history, I think this is a very imperialist argument and colonial argument, has been to point to what are misdeeds, or to point to the natives as savages or violent or uncivilized and so unlike us, in order to justify their mass murder and expulsion and so forth. This is not an old argument. It's recycled material from centuries of conquerors and imperialists, not just in Palestine, but throughout the world. And it is designed so that when people hear that, and when you can convince people of how awful and how evil the natives are, then they don't ask the questions. They don't ask questions. Why are they living in this open-air prison? Why are they surrounded by walls and checkpoints?
And the answer is because they're leaders who are not uncivilized, like our
There is no answer to that. You don't have the right to do that to the native people.
You're making such a phony argument.
And Mr. Dershowitz's insistence on the two-state solution is frankly, this is such propaganda, because
two-state solution is propaganda.
Israel has rejected that from the beginning, and what they have done on the ground is absolute proof of that. No one even needs to say anything, because thus far, Israel has swallowed up effectively 50% of the West Bank, which was supposed to be the Palestinian state.
So listen to that.
Like I said,
listen to that nonsense.
comment.
Israel has rejected the two-state solution. It accepted it in 48. It accepted it in 67. It offered it in 2000, 2001. It's offering it today. There's only one person on this stage who rejects the two-state solution, and that is this woman, who supports Hamas, who supports Hezbollah, who supports Husseini, and who rejects the Israel, and Israel is not going to accept that, and I'm not going to accept that. And I will not sin silently in the face of this kind of bigotry, no matter how politely it might be expressed. It is bigotry.
A question? Yes. Question. Both novelists are imagining their second novel, and I'd like each of them to imagine characters, one of whom is a Palestinian, one of whom is an Israeli. And I'd like Ms. Abulhawa to imagine that she first is speaking from the perspective of her character, who is an Israeli, very knowledgeable historically, and argue from that character's perspective in favor of the right of Israel to exist, and then the opposite, giving the strongest opposition argument in brief that she can, factually based in both cases. And then Professor Dershowitz, I would like him to argue from the Palestinian character's perspective, a radical, somewhat unreasonable person taking the position that Israel has no right to exist, and then provide an answer to that by his character.
So Susan, would you like to answer that first?
Sure. You know, I would recommend that you read the book, because I do have Israeli characters in the book, and it was very important to me that they be very human characters, and their motivations for, even some of them who had committed terrible crimes, and their motivations in there, I hope, are also...
You're not answering my question, please.
That was not a question, the role of the playing or what?
You want me to argue for...
I'd like you to argue from the character you imagine in novel 2.
What is this?
I don't have to, what I'm saying is I don't have to imagine, I've written about it. And
I'd like to say to the narrator, you're a heroic man.
That's okay. This character may be developed in a subsequent novel, but you have, and could you name even their public characters?
Let's say there's Moshe. Moshe, who is the Israeli soldier who had committed horrible atrocities against Palestinians. He was part of the Irgun and the Haganah, who had participated in some of the massacres. He loved his wife Yolanta dearly, but Yolanta had been ravaged by Nazis and was barren as a result. And he desperately wanted to make her happy, and that was when he kidnapped young Ismail. And in his later years, Moshe was haunted by the crimes that he had committed. And in explaining to his son, he said, you know, because of what they had suffered, because of the persecution that they had escaped, he said, all I wanted was a homeland. I wanted a place for my family. I wanted a place where I could be free and safe.
Okay,
that was the motivation of Moshe.
So her Israeli characters are all anti-Israel butchers who acknowledge what they've done is horrible, 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 but because she's written a scream. My Palestinian characters are supporters of the two-state solution. My Palestinian characters are ones who want to bring about peace. Even the terrorists, in whose mouth I put the case against Israel's right to exist, makes that case articulately. Two cases, actually. I had two characters. One, a Marxist from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who makes the kind of anti-colonial claims against Israel, and the other, an Islamic extremist who believes that perspective. I try very hard to present characters. What she presents and what she's presented here today are stick figure, totally fake presentations of Israelis. For her, it's a one-sided conflict. For her, there is no truth on the side of Israel. For her, there was no Holocaust. For her, there was no Hajj al-Husseini. For her, there was no Yasser Arafat. For her, oh, shut up. For her, there were no rockets from Gaza. To her, there were no Park Hotel. For her, there were no terrorist
Why don't you tell us what you feel? Forget about what her.
You don't want to listen. My suggestion to Susan is what my son's suggestion was. Buy a billboard, write a screen.
We have the chance here.
I told you, you don't, hey buddy, you don't like my answer, but I gave you an answer. All right, I told you
We have time for one more question, and whether or not people think that the answers are right, wrong, germane, or not, we learned something about the people who are giving them.
Look, there was real hope
one
that
more
we might have been able to come together here today, but that hope was dashed by the call for boycotts and divestment, by turning a literary event into a crass political event, and the fault for that lies 100% on her side. 100%. I presented a balanced literary presentation, and she responded with a call for boycotts and divestment. Shame on you.
Good for you.
You know, when in my opening statements, in fact, I was not calling. I was telling you of all the people in the world, the churches and the organizations who have heeded that call to boycott Israel. And the moral authority that is behind that, and the people. These are not bigots. These are not crazy people. No, these in fact
anybody
are
who calls
people
for
of
a boycott or divestment against Israel and doesn't say a word about Darfur or Rwanda is a bigot.
And when you say something he disagrees with, he calls you a name. And this is, I find that unseemly and really unbecoming of a Harvard professor, frankly.
Live their lives, how Harvard professors should conduct their lives. Okay.
I'm allowed to have an opinion.
So, and I've told her her novelist should write novels. If we
I
thought,
actually have read your novel. I don't think you've read mine. And in fact, I think that your depiction of Arabs is quite cartoonish. And I was really quite shocked by how little understanding you have of not just Palestinian society, but of the situation on the ground and the realities on the ground. The fact that, for example, a van cannot drive from Jerusalem to Jericho unimpeded. It's, you know, I mean, there are so many holes and that really betray your lack of knowledge of what's happening on the ground.
of course a van can drive. Of course a van can drive from Jerusalem to Jericho.
And I found it
I've done it.
cynical.
We've done it.
All right, so this is
I find it very
okay.
cynical. I just want to say, I find it very cynical that he used, that he named his main terrorist in this novel by the name of Faisal Husseini, which is one of Palestine's most beloved sons. And, you know, that in itself I find to be extremely...
Okay, we
purposely
understand.
named my terrorist Husseini to remind everybody that the leader of the Palestinian people during the Second World War was a Nazi. Yes, I purposely made that point. And that his picture with Hitler adorned the homes of many Palestinian families. I didn't make that up. I got that from Edward Said.
So, my friends, we are out of time. And the idea of confining a discussion to a novel and a novelistic and literary context, for sure, is at least as hard as a cheating piece.
Well, I did it.
And so those of you,
my conversation was completely about the novel.
We've learned what the authors wanted to say about their novels, about the others, to some extent about each other. And I want to thank people for coming. There will be a book signing for 15 minutes on each side. Is this correct? And Susan, your books will be signed over here. Is this correct? Alan, yours over here. That's right. Thank you much. Thank you for the audience. And see you later.